Okay, guys, take your health books and turn with me, please, to page 74, okay? Now, you are going to do this reading on your own, and I wrote it down on your paper here for today for Wednesday. So if you'll turn to Wednesday, you'll see it says for health. This is under classwork, okay? Read pages 74 to 78, and then you're going to do the CC on page 78. So probably what I would do right now is go ahead and stop your video and read 74 to 78, and then come back. I'm going to go over a few of the bold print words on the reading here, and I'm going to give you the answers for the CC. But I'd like for you to try to do the CC yourself first, and then I'm going to give you the answers, okay? All right, so if you want to go ahead and pause it and read, that'd be great, and then come back to me, okay? So for first aid to the rescue, that's what you should have read. So obviously, first aid is help that you're giving to somebody immediately after they've been hurt, and that can involve really a lot of different things as far as the first aid goes, because some injuries are minor, some injuries, of course, are major. You can know if there's infection around something. I'm sure you've probably all had like a cut get infected or something. It'll get puffy kind of around, red and swollen around the cut, swelling, sometimes pus, which is disgusting, but that kind of thing can happen because those are sure signs of infection, okay? The number to call, which you guys are third graders, so you should all know this, is 911 if there's an emergency, and you're all very capable of doing that. So a minor injury could be something like where you get a cut, or maybe you twist your ankle, or you get a bump, things like that. So a lot of those kind of things with minor injuries can be taken care of by icing something if you would twist or sprain your ankle, or cleaning a cut thoroughly and using antiseptic or some kind of peroxide or something, and soap and water as well to clean the cut and keep that covered so it doesn't get germs into it until it can be treated a little bit later. You see the little acrostic there for minor injuries at the top of 75, rest, ice, and then you have a compress and elevate. Okay, and you guys would have read about all of those things. If you have a wrap or a compress around the area, that would be, for example, if you fell, twisted your ankle or your leg, and you had to wrap it with an ACE bandage, something like that. Elevate it if you're keeping it propped up. If you've ever had something sprained or twisted, it can swell, so you want to keep that elevated, okay? Some of you even have had broken arms, legs, so you understand about the swelling and things like that can happen because of that. Okay, on 76, then we get into a little more serious things where first aid would be required for emergency situations. And there are several different things that can happen there. It's something that if you know I can't really help them, you can only do so much. The most important thing and the best thing that you can do is to get help. So get an adult. If there is no adult around close by, then you can call 911, or you can find a neighbor or your parents or whoever, and they can call 911. It's also to remain calm in emergency situations, just to remain calm, okay? And you guys read about the Heimlich maneuver. That's a very unusual word, but that would be if someone is choking. And when you get a little older in high school, you'll take first aid classes. And I have taken several first aid classes in high school, college, and then later on before I began teaching too. And you can learn how if someone has some food lodged in their throat, you stand behind them and you press on their stomach. You're trying to push the air up and get and dislodge whatever it is that they're choking on. I remember when I was a little girl, my mom had to do the Heimlich maneuver on another little girl, one of my little friends at church one time. At a church dinner, she got choked on like a piece of candy, and my mom did the Heimlich, and it shot all the way across the room. So that was kind of scary, but it's important that you are very careful when you're eating. You shouldn't be running around chewing food, things like that. Make sure you're chewing your food up good when you swallow. A lot of things like that, you can prevent choking. All right, and then electrical shock. That is also something where if someone has been electrocuted, you should never touch them because that shock can travel, and you want to stay back and stay away from any electrical devices that might be around or outlets, and definitely just call 911. That's important, okay? You also know not to play outside during a thunderstorm, no swimming, things like that your parents would have told you, but those are all preventative things, okay? All right, and then if someone is unconscious, which means they're not awake, or you don't know if they're breathing or not, you can't tell, then of course, you're always going to call 911 or get help. If you're not near a phone, get to a phone or have someone else get to the phone for you. Okay? All right, then let's see here. We're going to look at the CC here. What is help that is given immediately to people who are hurt? The answer is first aid. Number 1 is first aid. Number 2, what is the emergency phone number? Say it with me. 911. 3, what are injuries that do not require immediate attention from a doctor? Those are minor injuries, and we talked about that with cuts and, bumps and things like that. What are the first aid steps for bumps and twists? Rest, ice, compress or wrap, and elevate, raise above the heart. Okay? 5, what is the most important thing to remember when someone has had electrical shock? Do not touch a person. Do not. What are the most important things to remember in an emergency situation? To stay calm, find help, and call 911. So there are 3 things there. Stay calm, find help, and call 911. Those are the 3 things. Okay. Tomorrow you'll be working on a review sheet, and I'll give you the answers for that another day. Very good. Now we're going to move on to history. In your history book, we started reading about Dwight D. Eisenhower yesterday, and so we're starting on 403. So you are going to read 403 and 404 to yourself, and if you want to stop that right now, we're going to discuss it, but you want to stop and read and then come back for the discussion, okay? So it's kind of cool. President Eisenhower, or Dwight Eisenhower, took part in 2 wars. That was World War I and World War II, which is pretty interesting. He became the top officer for the United States, which we read that. You see the D-Day invasion at Normandy here in the picture. And so this would have been during World War I. June 6, 1944, that's known as D-Day, and many of you may have heard people talk about that before, adults talk about it. He led 150,000 troops into France to fight the German troops there. And this battle led to the end of World War II. So this, I misspoke there. This battle was in World War II, not World War I. I'm sorry about that. He also took part in World War I, but D-Day was World War II. I think I said that wrong. Sorry about that. So after he left the Army in 1948, then what did he become? He was the president of Columbia University in New York City. Okay. And then, of course, his name was Ike, his nickname. And then he also ran for office of the president. And his slogan, his presidential campaign slogan was "I like Ike," which is kind of a catchy slogan there. Just a little bonus fact of a point of interest: Dwight D. Eisenhower was the first president to ride in a helicopter. I think that's kind of cool. President Eisenhower loved the United States. He loved his country, and he served our country during 2 world wars. And his goal and desire was to keep our country safe and free. And so we would say he's a patriot. He definitely showed patriotism. And it not only made him a great soldier and a great general, but later on a great president. And so we can be thankful for leaders like that we've had in our nation's history in the past, okay? All right, so there's some interesting things about some things he accomplished, about the Civil Rights Act, signing that into law. And he started NASA, which is huge, which was our country's flights into space. That stands for National Aeronautics and Space Administration. He added the states of Alaska and Hawaii to the United States. So many important accomplishments that he made during his presidency. Also interesting to note that he was president for 8 years. Okay, I like the quote on page 405. It says, without God, President Eisenhower said this, without God, there could be no American form of government, nor an American way of life. All right, so number 1, what words were added to the Pledge of Allegiance while Dwight Eisenhower was president? We talked about this yesterday. It's under God. Under God. Number 2, and if I'm going too fast here for you, then you're welcome to stop the video, write the answer down, and then carry on. That's the good thing about it being videoed. Number 2, what words that President Eisenhower signed into law became our national motto? In God we trust. In God we trust. Number 3, which famous military academy did Dwight Eisenhower attend? You know? It's West Point. If you know it, then say it out loud, okay? West Point. Number 4, what program to study space began while Eisenhower was president? That is NASA, NASA. You just have to write the abbreviation. 5, name 2 important wars in which Dwight Eisenhower served. That's World War I and II. How many years was he president? 8. And what states were added while Eisenhower was president? Alaska and Hawaii. Okay, that's all for today, and I will see you tomorrow. Bye, guys.